The shed had been her prison for 3 days when the singing began. Emma pressed her back against the rough wooden wall, her wrists raw from the rope that bound them. The small space smelled of motor oil and forgotten summers, tools hanging like silent witnesses. Through the single window she could see the corner of the neighbor's house, close enough to touch if walls could dissolve, far enough to be another world entirely. Her throat was dry from crying, from pleading through the locked door that David had stopped answering. He'd bring water when he remembered, food when her silence satisfied him. But silence was something Emma had never been good at. So she began to hum, softly at first, then stronger, letting the melody fill the cramped space. It was an old hymn her grandmother had sung, about finding light in dark places. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. Next door, Harold Whitman paused in his kitchen, coffee halfway to his weathered lips. The old cowboy had lived alone for 8 years since Martha's funeral, and in all that time silence had been his closest companion. His rodeo days were long behind him, but his hands still bore the scars of working cattle and breaking horses. He'd forgotten what it felt like to hear a woman's voice, really hear it. This voice was different, raw with pain, but pure in a way that reminded him of the old Apache songs his grandfather used to hum while mending saddles. It seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Harold moved to the window facing the Murphy property, his worn boots silent on the wooden floor. The shed sat just 20 feet away, pressed against the chain-link fence that divided the properties. He'd never paid it much attention before, just another outbuilding in this neighborhood that had once been open rangeland, but the voice was definitely coming from there. A woman's voice, singing with the kind of desperation that reminded Harold of horses he'd seen trapped in box canyons, wild-eyed and ready to fight for freedom. The song stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Harold standing at his window with questions crowding his mind. Through the Murphys' kitchen window, he could see David moving around, making dinner for one, just like every other evening for the past 3 days. Harold had never been one to involve himself in neighbors' business. After Martha died, he'd pulled inward like a Mustang retreating to high country, speaking only when necessary. The outside world had become too sharp, too full of reminders of the ranch life they'd built together, the horses they'd raised, the cattle drives they'd shared, the simple rhythm of country living that had died with her. But something about that voice, the way it carried both surrender and defiance, made him linger at the window long after dark had fallen. It reminded him of something his Apache friend Joe Crow Feather used to say. Sometimes the caged bird sings not from joy, but to remember it still has wings. Emma dozed fitfully against the wall, her body aching from the confined space. Time moved differently in captivity, each hour stretching endlessly. When she woke, moonlight streamed through the dirty window, her stomach cramped with hunger, her throat burned with thirst. David had brought half a sandwich that afternoon, watching her eat with detached interest. "You ready to apologize?" he'd asked. Emma had looked at him, this man she'd married 3 years ago who'd seemed so gentle during courtship. The bruises on her arms told a different story now. "For what?" she'd whispered. The door had slammed shut. The lock had clicked back into place. Emma lifted her voice again in the midnight loneliness. This time it was a lullaby her mother had sung about mockingbirds and promises. The words floated up and out, carrying all the things she couldn't say. "I'm here. I'm still here. Please don't let me disappear." Harold heard it from his bedroom, where he lay staring at the ceiling. Martha used to sing in her sleep sometimes, soft melodies that had made him feel lucky to be alive. This voice reminded him of that, of what it felt like to be necessary to someone. He got up and moved to the window, looking out at the shed in the moonlight. The lock on the door was new, its brass surface gleaming against weathered wood. A locked shed, a missing wife, a voice singing in the dark. Harold stood there for a long time, listening to a woman he'd never met sing herself through whatever hell she was living. And for the first time in 8 years, he felt something that wasn't grief or guilt. It was anger, clean and sharp and purposeful. When Emma's voice rose again in the gathering darkness, Harold did something he hadn't done since Martha's funeral. He sang back. His voice was rusty, uncertain. But when he heard the woman's song pause, then continue with something like joy, he knew she'd heard him. Two voices, separated by wood and wire and years of silence, finding each other in the dark. Emma pressed her ear to the wall, hardly daring to breathe. Someone was there. Someone was listening. For the first time in 3 days, she wasn't alone. She sang louder then, letting her voice carry all the hope she had left. And when the man's voice joined hers again, stronger now, more certain, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. The possibility of rescue. Not just from this shed, but from the life that had led her here. As their voices wove together in the darkness, Emma closed her eyes and remembered what it felt like to be heard. Really heard. Not as a possession or a problem, but as a human being worthy of song, worthy of witness, worthy of saving. Through the wall, Harold harmonized with a stranger's pain and felt his own heart crack open just enough to let the light back in. Harold stood at his kitchen window at dawn, staring at the shed while coffee grew cold in his cup. David's truck was gone. Left early for work, same as always. But something felt different about the morning silence. He found himself at the back door without deciding to move. 8 years of careful isolation fought against the pull he felt toward that locked shed 20 feet away. He stepped outside. "Hello?" His voice came out rough. "Miss, are you all right in there?" Silence. Then faint. A scraping sound. Like someone shifting position. "I'm Harold. I live next door. I heard you singing last night." A pause. Then barely a whisper. "Harold?" The relief in her voice nearly knocked him backward. "Yes, ma'am. I'm here." "Are you hurt?" "I'm locked in. He locked me in here, and I don't know when he's coming back." Harold's hands clenched into fists. "How long?" 4 days now. Maybe 5. Another pause. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be telling you this." "My name's Harold Whitman," he said firmly. "I'm 71 years old. Spent 40 years working cattle and horses before this neighborhood was even built. Lost my wife 8 years ago, and I haven't had a real conversation with another human being in longer than I care to admit. Knowing your name would be a privilege." Through the wall, Emma felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like that? Like she was a person worth knowing instead of a problem to be managed? "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Murphy." "It's nice to meet you, Emma Murphy." Harold's voice carried the formal courtesy of old-school ranch hands, the kind of man who still tipped his hat to ladies. "And I want you to know that whatever's happening here, you're not alone anymore." Emma pressed her forehead against the rough wood. "He'll be back. When he comes home from work, he'll check on me." "Let me worry about that. For now, are you hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal. He's not... It's mostly just the isolation, the control. He says I need to learn to appreciate what I have." Harold bit back angry words. "When does he typically come home?" 6:30, sometimes 7 if he stops for drinks. He'll unlock the door, ask if I'm ready to apologize. If I say yes, he might let me come inside. If I say no, you stay locked out here. "Yes." Harold looked at the shed with new eyes, seeing it for the torture device it truly was. "Emma, do you want to get out of there?" The question hung in the air like a bridge neither was sure they were ready to cross. "I used to want things. Before I met David, I had plans, dreams. I was going to be a music teacher. I had this little apartment with plants in every window. And I'd sing while I watered them." Emma's voice caught. Now I feel like I'm disappearing. That's not living, Emma. That's just dying slowly. I know, but I don't remember how to be anything else. How to take up space again. You start by singing, like you did last night. You remind yourself that you have a voice, and that voice matters. Emma laughed then, unexpected and genuine. Will you sing with me again tonight? Every night, until you don't need me to anymore. They spent the morning talking through the wall. Harold told her about Martha, about their 43 years together. Emma talked about her grandmother, who'd taught her to find music in everything. When they heard David's truck in the driveway, Emma's voice went tight with fear. Go inside, please. Harold retreated to his kitchen window where he could watch and listen. David emerged looking tired and irritated. Smaller than Harold had expected, the kind of man who'd disappear in a crowd. Nothing about him screamed monster, which somehow made it worse. The lock clicked open. Harold couldn't hear what was said, but he watched David's body language, casual, bored, like he was checking on livestock. After a few minutes, the door closed again. No lights came on in the house. David had left his wife locked outside for another night. Harold waited until dark before approaching the fence again. Emma? I'm here. Her voice was smaller now. What did he want? The same thing he always wants. For me to admit I was wrong. A pause. I couldn't do it tonight. I kept thinking about what you said about having a voice that matters. Good. That's good, Emma. Is it? Because now I have to spend another night out here and I'm so tired, Harold. Then don't be strong tonight. Just be. Let me be strong enough for both of us. Emma's voice rose into the darkness. Not a hymn this time, but something softer, sadder. Harold joined her, his bass notes weaving underneath her melody like a foundation, like a promise. And somewhere in the space between their voices, a plan began to form. The scream came at 2 a.m, sharp and sudden, cutting through Harold's dreams. He was at the window before his mind caught up, heart hammering. The shed sat in darkness, silent now, but he'd heard something. Emma? He called it softly, then louder. Emma, are you all right? Nothing. Then a sound that was half moan, half whimper. Alive, but hurt. Harold grabbed his flashlight, not caring about caution anymore. His beam caught the shed's window, spider-webbed with cracks. Something dark smeared across the sill. Blood. Emma! He shouted it this time. Emma, answer me! The fence was too high to climb, topped with rusted wire. But where it met the corner post, weather had worked the metal loose. He grabbed the section and pulled, feeling it give. Inside the shed, Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, head throbbing where it had struck the window. David had come in the evening, swaying and reeking of bourbon, eyes flat and dangerous. Been thinking about you out here, he'd slurred, about how ungrateful you've been. The beating had been methodical, practiced. David knew exactly how much damage to do without leaving visible marks. But when Emma had tried to crawl away, when her hand struck the window, something in David had snapped. He'd grabbed her by the hair and slammed her head against the glass. Once, twice, until the window cracked and Emma went limp. Now, through fog and pain, Emma heard Harold's voice calling her name. Here, she managed, the word thick and strange. I'm here. The fence section finally gave way. Harold squeezed through and moved across the yard, rage and purpose driving him forward. The shed door was secured with a heavy padlock, but the window was already damaged, the frame loose. Harold used his flashlight to knock out the remaining glass, then carefully cleared the opening. Emma, I'm coming in. Don't try to move. He pulled himself through with awkward determination. Glass crunched under his knees as he dropped inside, his flashlight finding Emma crumpled against the far wall. Blood matted her hair, dark stains marking her face and arms. Her left eye was swelling shut, and when she tried to smile, he could see her split lip. "Hello, Harold," she whispered, as if they were meeting for tea. "Oh, honey." The endearment slipped out, carrying 43 years of tenderness. "What did he do to you?" "Same thing he always does. Just more this time." Emma tried to sit up and went pale, hand flying to her head. "I think I might have a concussion." Harold knelt beside her, hands gentle as he examined the damage. The head wound was nasty, but not life-threatening. The real damage was in her eyes, the resigned acceptance of someone taught to expect only pain. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No." The refusal was immediate, panicked. "No hospitals. They ask questions. David has friends on the police force. He'll say I'm unstable, that I hurt myself. He's done it before." Harold felt that roar again, louder. "Before?" "The last time I tried to leave, I made it to my sister's house in Denver. David convinced everyone I was having a breakdown, dangerous to myself. They brought me back, made me apologize." The casual way she said it made Harold want to put his fist through the wall. Instead, he forced his voice to stay calm. "That's not going to happen this time. You don't understand. David's smart, careful. He's never left marks before where anyone could see. This was a mistake. He'll be panicked when he sees what he's done." Harold looked at this woman who'd become real to him through songs in the dark. The thought of leaving her here was impossible. "Then we don't wait for him to come back." Emma stared at him. "What?" "You said yourself he made a mistake tonight. Lost control. That means he's off balance. It also means he's probably passed out drunk somewhere." Harold's voice gained strength. "We have a window, maybe the only one we'll get." "Harold, no, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. My truck's in the driveway. We can be 3 states away before he wakes up." "And go where?" "I don't have money, identification. He keeps everything locked up." "I have money. I have a house that's paid for and 40 years of savings with no one to spend them on. And I have a friend in Wyoming who runs a women's shelter." Emma felt something flutter in her chest that she was afraid to name. Hope was dangerous, but looking at Harold's face in the flashlight beam, seeing the determination there, the controlled anger on her behalf, she realized some chances only came once. "What about your life here? Your home?" Harold thought of the empty house, the silence that had been his companion for 8 years, the careful routines that had kept him breathing but not living. "I've been dying slowly in that house since Martha passed. Maybe it's time I tried living again." He extended his hand to her. "What do you say, Emma Murphy? Ready to remember what it feels like to take up space in the world?" Emma looked at his outstretched hand, weathered and gentle, offering freedom and uncertainty in equal measure. Through the broken window, she could hear night sounds of a world she'd almost forgotten existed. She reached out and took Harold's hand. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready." As Harold helped her to her feet, Emma began to hum softly. Not a hymn this time, but something new. Something that sounded like a road song, like morning coming after the longest night. Together they climbed through the broken window and into whatever came next. The Wyoming mountains rose like cathedral spires against the dawn sky, their peaks painted pink and gold. Emma pressed her face to the passenger window of Harold's truck, watching the landscape roll past like scenes from a half-remembered dream. They'd been driving for 18 hours, stopping only for gas and coffee, and checking Emma's injuries. The swelling around her eye had gone down, but the bruises had deepened to purple and yellow. "How much farther?" she asked, her voice still rough. "Should be coming up soon." Harold's hands were steady on the wheel, but Emma could see the exhaustion in his shoulders. "Sarah's place is just a few miles up the mountain." "What if I can't do this? What if I'm too broken to start over? Harold was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried hard-won wisdom. 8 years ago, I thought I was done. Martha was the music in my life. And when she died, I figured the song was over. I spent 8 years sitting in silence. He glanced at Emma. Then I heard you singing through that wall, and I remembered something important. The song doesn't end when one voice stops. It just changes key. The Molina Ranch appeared around a bend like an answer to prayer. The main house was a sprawling log structure with wide porches and flower boxes. Several smaller cabins dotted the property, connected by gravel paths and wooden bridges crossing a creek. Horses grazed in distant pastures, and the whole place had the settled, permanent feel of a working ranch that had been in the same family for generations. Sarah Molina emerged from the main house as Harold's truck pulled up. She was about 60, with silver-streaked hair braided down her back, and the kind of presence that came from years of ranch work. Her grandmother had been Apache, and something in her calm, assessing gaze reminded Harold of the wisdom his old friend Joe used to carry. "Harold Whitman," she called out, striding toward them with the confident gait of someone who'd spent her life around horses and cattle. "It's been too long, you stubborn old cowboy." Harold found himself wrapped in a hug that smelled of sage and wood smoke. When Sarah released him, her eyes moved to Emma with practiced assessment. "You must be Emma. I'm Sarah. Welcome to the mountain." Emma had expected questions, forms, explanations. Instead, Sarah simply offered her hand and waited. "Thank you for letting us come here. Helping is what we do. But first, you look like you could use a meal and a proper bed. Everything else can wait." The cabin Sarah led them to was small, but perfect. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a living area with a stone fireplace. Windows on 3 sides looked out onto the mountain meadow, where aspen trees trembled gold in the autumn breeze. "This is yours for as long as you need it," Sarah said, setting groceries on the counter. "No timeline, no pressure. Some women stay weeks, some months. Whatever feels right." Harold set Emma's small bag on the bed. "I should probably head back, get things sorted out." "No." The word came out sharper than Emma intended. "Please, stay, at least for a few days. I don't know how to be alone yet, how to trust that I'm really safe." "There's a guest room in the main house," Sarah offered. "You're welcome to stay as long as Emma needs you." The first week passed in healing sleep and careful conversations. Emma spent hours on the cabin's porch, watching the light change on the mountains, and slowly remembering what it felt like to breathe without permission. Harold stayed close, but not crowding. Other women came and went around the ranch, some with children, all with stories written in the way they held themselves. But gradually, Emma began to see something else in their faces: the slow return of light, the cautious bloom of laughter. On the 8th day, Emma woke to find Harold sitting on her porch with 2 cups of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning." Emma settled beside him. "Harold, last night I had a dream. Not about David, not about the shed. I dreamed I was teaching music to children. Real children with bright faces and voices like bells." She sipped her coffee, tasting hope. "I think I'm ready to start remembering who I used to be." "And who was that?" "Someone who believed her voice mattered. Someone who took up exactly the right amount of space in the world." Emma looked out at the vast mountain vista, no walls in sight. "Someone worth saving." 3 months later, Emma received divorce papers. David had filed citing abandonment. Along with the legal documents was a note from Mrs. Chen, a neighbor who'd heard about Emma's disappearance. "I always wondered about those sounds from the shed," the note read. "I should have done something sooner. I hope you found what you were looking for." Emma folded the letter and walked outside, where Harold was teaching some of the ranch children to identify bird calls. His laughter mixed with theirs, creating a symphony she was learning to be part of. "Good news?" he asked when he saw her face. "The best kind. The kind that means the past is finally past." Emma pulled out her phone. "I want to send something to Mrs. Chen, to thank her for caring." She lifted the phone and began to sing. Not a hymn, not a lullaby, but something new. A song about finding light in dark places, about voices that carry across impossible distances, about the courage it takes to believe you deserve better. Harold joined in, his bass notes weaving underneath her melody. And slowly the children added their voices too, until the mountain meadow rang with music. When the song ended, Emma looked at the recording timer. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of pure joy. "That's perfect," she said, pressing send. As the sun set behind the mountains, Emma sat on her porch and thought about walls, the ones that had held her, and the ones she'd built around her own heart. Both kinds could be broken. Both kinds could be left behind. In the distance, a mockingbird called, its voice carrying all the songs it had ever heard and making them new. Emma listened, smiled, and began to sing along. She was free, she was found, she was home.